Hello and welcome to the CECFP Financial Management Training for Family Daycare Home Sponsors. This training is presented by the Oregon Department of Education Child Nutrition Programs, also known as ODE-CNP. My name is Shirley Wu, and I am a Child Nutrition Specialist and Technical Assistance Coordinator with ODE's Child Nutrition Program. I will be presenting the first and last third of our financial management training today. With me is Teresa Murray, so take it away, Teresa.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Teresa Murray, and I am the Finance and Audit Specialist on the community team. And I will be presenting the middle section of the training today.
All right, thanks, Teresa. Before we get started with this training, we want to provide a disclaimer, which is that ODE-CNP staff are not financial auditors, and we cannot give official financial counsel. This means we can't tell you if your finances are set up correctly or not. We are here to provide technical assistance related to CECFP, and we can provide you with information on whether you meet CECFP financial management requirements based on federal regulations. In this training, we will go through the learning objectives and then start with the basics with Financial Management 101, then performance standards for the CECFP, then learning about nonprofit food service, and then applying that knowledge to your organization. This section is further divided into looking at the big picture, how you can determine nonprofit food service or NPFS, how you create a CECFP budget, and then figuring out how to complete your management plan and financial management procedures. Once you are done with trainings, we hope that you will have a comprehensive understanding of how financial management is implemented and tracked in CECFP, and that you will be able to create or update the financial management procedures for your organization that meets all CECFP requirements to maintain nonprofit food service program operations, which sponsors can do by keeping a nonprofit food service account. Financial management for the CECFP can seem intimidating, but ultimately it is about understanding the basics of CECFP financial management, which is that one of the sources of CECFP funding received for family daycare home sponsors include administrative reimbursements based on the number of homes served times the current rate. You can find the current reimbursement rates on the ODE-CNP CECFP page. The reimbursements received must be used by sponsors on costs incurred to administer CECFP, and the reimbursements cannot be used for any other purpose. The other CECFP funds that are also available include provider reimbursement pass-through funds, which are funds for meal reimbursements for daycare home providers that must be passed from your organization to the provider within 5 business days. And then there are the carryover funds. These are unused CECFP administrative funds that are left over after all approvable CECFP expenses are paid in a previous fiscal year. Thinking of these sources of CECFP funding, we can start to think about the documentation needed to show that you are using all the CECFP reimbursements for the intended and approved purpose. This can be done by providing ODE-CNP with financial documentation during renewals each year. Sponsors must also complete carryover fund procedures each year after the fiscal year is closed if there are any CECFP funds left over. And in addition, there is a new requirement for all sponsors to provide a 1-month review of financial records on an annual basis. So we'll take a look at all of these requirements a little more thoroughly. We will start with the financial documentation required during renewals each year. Family daycare home sponsors must submit a current organizational budget and chart, an organizational profit and loss statement, and an organizational bank statement. In addition, written CECFP financial management procedures and a CECFP annual budget must be submitted. We will look at the CECFP specific written procedures and the CECFP annual budget even more closely. Both a CECFP budget and written financial management procedures are required from all sponsors, and the two documents must work together to provide a picture of how CECFP finances will look each year. The CECFP annual budget reflects projected CECFP admin income and expenses for the upcoming fiscal year. If situations change, budget revisions may be required during the year. And the written financial management procedures provide an up-to-date explanation of the expenses listed in the budget and how they will be handled, who is responsible for each task, and the timelines that will be followed for them. The written procedure expands on the required duties that are listed in your CMP Web management plan. After renewals each year and once the fiscal year closes, sponsors are responsible for completing a carryover funds procedure if they have unspent CECFP funds left over after all approvable CECFP expenses are paid. This fund amount can be carried over into the new fiscal year to be used for approved CECFP expenses, but cannot exceed 10% of the CECFP administrative reimbursement from the previous fiscal year. This carryover fund must be tracked separately from other administrative revenue and expenses, and the funds must be applied in a first in, first out policy, meaning that you will use this fund first. In order to accept these carryover funds, family daycare home sponsors must review all CECFP administrative expenditures that are entered in CMP Web for the prior fiscal year. If there are any errors that are identified during this review, you must revise CMP Web claims and then resubmit this to ODE CMP for approval. Then you must submit a report from your financial management system, such as a profit and loss report, identifying the amount of unspent CCFP reimbursements earned the previous fiscal year. ODE CMP will review the report and compare it to your CMP web claims, and if everything matches, which we hope it will, approve this carryover fund. After approval, sponsors then apply the carryover funds to the current fiscal year expenses for CECFP. Finally, we have our 1-month review of financial records to be conducted annually. This is required due to new program integrity rules rolled out by USDA in August of 2023. While ODE CMP does not have a definite start date to implement this, USDA is requiring state agencies to have a procedure as of August 23, 2024, and ODE CMP is currently planning to start full implementation in fiscal year 2025. ODE CMP is requesting further guidance from USDA, and we will provide additional training prior to implementation. To give you an idea of what we are planning, we expect that the 1-month review of financial records will include ODE CMP staff reaching out to sponsors once a year to request receipts and documentation for all income and expenses in the nonprofit food service account in order to verify CECFP transactions from purchase to payment. If you have gone through an administrative review before, this will include the same financial documentation that is looked at during a review. So don't think of this as a requirement for sponsors to collect new documentation. The new requirement is simply that ODE CMP will be required to review the documentation that you are already keeping at least once a year. Again, more details will be available at a later date. So now that you know the basics of what is required each year from ODE CMP, let's talk about the why. Why does ODE CMP need to review all these documents? And the reason is to ensure program integrity. we want to make sure that you are using the reimbursements for CECFP purposes. This is spelled out under the CECFP performance standards under the CECFP regulations in 7 CFR 226.6 B118. You may know them better as VCA. They stand for Financial Viability, Administrative Capability, and Program Accountability. These performance standards cover a lot of ground, and all three parts of VCA are important when it comes to financial management for family daycare home sponsors. Under financial viability, it spells out that sponsors must spend these CFP funds appropriately and account for them, and that sponsors must demonstrate there are adequate financial resources to operate CECFP on a daily basis. This is to ensure continuous operations of CECFP. All costs must be specified in the CECFP annual budget, and they must be necessary to run the program, reasonable in cost, allowable for the program, and appropriately documented. Under administrative capability, sponsors must have enough qualified staff to run CECFP and have the appropriate ratios for their monitors. This means that for every 50 to 150 homes, there is one full-time equivalent staff for monitoring. And under program accountability, sponsors must show that they are accountable by having adequate oversight of their programs with written financial management procedures for their CECFP funds and by maintaining all required CECFP records, which includes financial records, of course. To translate all of this into actions, this means that to meet your performance standards, sponsors must hire qualified financial and administrative staff, ensure that your organization has sufficient financial resources to run CECFP smoothly, have a written financial management procedure detailing out how you are tracking your CECFP funds and expenses, submit an annual budget showing how you plan to spend your reimbursements, and save all supporting documentation for your income and expenses for CECFP. Supporting documentation may include claim reimbursement documentation, bank statements, receipts, invoices, time distribution reports, payroll records, utility bills, cost allocation documents, mileage logs, and profit and loss reports. There may be additional documentation that must be saved depending on the expenses that are approved on your budget. So why do we make such a big deal about performance standards? They are important because the performance standards are in place to support nonprofit food service. Nonprofit food service is the guiding principle for CECFP financial management. It means that food service operations conducted by the organization are principally for the benefit of the participants, and all CECFP reimbursement funds are used solely for the operations and improvements of the program. How can you tell if you are running a nonprofit food service each month? Well, it's not enough to simply estimate or guess. Instead, you need to account for all CECFP income and expenses separately from other organizational income and expenses. This can be done by setting up a CECFP fund account or creating CECFP income and expense accounts supported by the chart of accounts. Either option is fine if the system used tracks CECFP income, CECFP expenses, and the CECFP account balance each month. The main requirement is that you have a system in place that supports CECFP income was used solely on allowable CECFP expenses, and any unspent income has been retained for future CECFP expenses. And when we say allowable CECFP expenses, it means that these costs are included on the approved CECFP budget and can be paid for using CECFP funds. For family daycare home sponsors, this will include administrative labor, costs for supplies and equipment, office expenses, travel costs, training expenses, and administrative expenses. These are necessary and reasonable costs that support the goals of CECFP. All costs must have prior approval from ODECMP, which can be done through the submission of the annual CECFP budget or through revisions of the budget as necessary. It is important to note that all costs charged must be actual costs. There are some costs that will require specific prior written approval. These are costs that are not allowed unless specifically approved by ODECMP. It can include costs that are not customarily incurred in routine operation of CECFP, such as contracts for software, translations, or cell phones. Or it could be for less than arm's length transactions, where you are hiring services or buying products from someone that you or someone in your organization has a personal relationship with, like friends or family. These cannot simply be approved as a line item on your budget. Instead, more specific approvals are necessary, and you will be working with our finance and audit specialist, Teresa Murray, on this. Many, if not all, family daycare home sponsors will also have allocated costs. And these are costs that benefit more than one program or will benefit both CECFP and non-CECFP activities. Most of the time, these are office expenses such as rent or utilities. Only the share of the cost that benefits CECFP may be charged to CECFP, and how it is allocated will vary. All allocated costs must be documented with the cost of the item, the total amount paid or will be paid by the organization, the portion of the cost assigned to CECFP, and the method of allocation. All of this is listed out in the CECFP annual budget template. And of course, all these costs must be supported with documentation. For administrative funds, this can include claim reimbursement documentation, bank statements, time distribution reports, and payroll records, utility bills and cost allocation documentation, mileage logs, allocation methods, and profit and loss reports. All required supporting documentation will be dependent on what you are charging to the CECFP fund account. There may be additional documentation that may be required that is not listed on this slide. This is not all inclusive. And remember that only expenses that are supported by documentation will be allowable. For pass-through funds, supporting documentation may include claim submissions and revisions, tracking of provider payment methods, documentation of payments made. These can be statements showing electronic transactions or cash checks. We will also want contact documentation for unliquidated funds. These are the uncashed checks and remitted payment documents for unliquidated funds. So now that we have gone over the allowable costs and what is needed to support them, let's look at unfunded and unallowable costs. Unfunded costs are those that exceed CECFP reimbursements. These will still need to be listed on the budget, but with minimal detail and no supporting documentation are required. These are not as common for family daycare home sponsors, but it is good to be aware of what unfunded costs mean. Unallowable CECFP costs are those that cannot be charged to the CECFP account. This may be because they are expressly unallowable, meaning they are categorically not allowed. For example, no alcoholic beverages, late fees, interest payments, bad debts, or tips can be paid for using CECFP funds. Some costs are directly associated unallowable costs. These are costs that may be generated solely due to incurring another unallowable cost. For example, you are attending a party hosted by your organization, which is categorically unallowable for CECFP. All travel and lodging costs associated with the party would also be directly associated and unallowable as well. Finally, we have unallowable costs due to action or inaction. This means that the cost would be allowable if all steps were followed, but because of some reason, such as not having supporting documentation, not allocating properly, or not having it approved in the budget prior to expending, these costs become unallowable. We want to make sure this doesn't happen, so make sure to revise your budgets before you start charging any new cost categories, and make sure you are keeping all your documentation on file. Now that you have an understanding of what expenses are allowed and not allowed, we can move to understanding account balances in your nonprofit food service account. The whole reason why you need a dedicated CACFP fund account is to make it easier to understand your monthly and annual account balance for CACFP. If you have a positive account balance, it means that there is money left over after all the allowable CACFP expenses were paid, and that additional CACFP funds left over must be spent on allowable CACFP expenses you have, or by improving the CACFP through improving services. Most of our family daycare homes have a positive account balance each year. When you have a positive account balance at the end of your fiscal year, remember you can carry over up to 10% of your administrative reimbursements that were earned but not expended to the next fiscal year. These are the carryover funds that we mentioned earlier. A negative account balance means that your allowable CACFP expenses has exceeded the CACFP income you earned. When this happens, you must have other organizational funds to pay for these expenses. Even if you do not expect this to happen, you must have other funds that are available to ensure your continued viability in CACFP. So now that you know the basics, I'm going to hand this over to Teresa, who's going to walk you through how to apply this knowledge to your organization.
All right, thank you, Shirley. So, how do you implement financial management and maintain a nonprofit food service account at your organization? So, in this section, think about what you just learned and about the requirements of CACP financial management and how you will make sure that all those requirements are met. So, we're going to look first at the big picture of fiscal accountability in CACFP, and then we will review what is needed in a system to determine nonprofit food service. Then we will see how that is used to create a CACP budget. And then we'll look at how the written management plan and the financial management procedures will encapsulate your current practices. So when we think about financial oversight and all the required duties as part of managing this part of CACFP, we can think of it as a cycle that repeats multiple times a year for some actions and only once a year for others. So new sponsors and renewing sponsors will always start with creating a budget. For renewing sponsors, this occurs in August of each year. The budget is an estimate of what you anticipate your organization will receive from ODE-C&P for reimbursements, and then what you plan to spend those reimbursements on. Renewing sponsors should obtain historical information for CACP operations from prior years as a baseline for their annual CACP budget. Actual revenues and expenditures from the prior year should be the starting point for the current year budget. And the budget is approved by ODE-C&P after a review process. And then throughout the year, sponsors charge expenses needed to operate the program per the approved budget. Now remember that source documents and supporting documents must be maintained to support all expenses charged to CACP funds. Monthly expenses should be reviewed to the budget by completing a budget to actual comparison. And if the actual income and expenses are significantly different than the estimated income and expenses on the budget, sponsors should reassess the budget and seek technical assistance from ODE-C&P to identify if a budget revision is necessary. This part of the cycle repeats monthly. So anytime there's a significant change to your budget, such as a change in staffing or a change in new cost category is going to be charged, a budget revision must be sent to ODE-C&P. And this, depending on your organization, may occur multiple times a year. Prior approval is also required. So any new costs may not be incurred or charged to CACFP prior to receiving budget approval from ODE-C&P. So the financial oversight cycle may vary for sponsors based on your size and staffing, but all of these actions will be undertaken by sponsors throughout each year. So part of understanding the big picture of financial management is also knowing who will be in charge of managing it and identifying the staff positions that will have a role in maintaining the nonprofit food service. So on this side is a list of on this slide is a list of the main financial management and administrative duties. So for example, who oversees your financial management? Is it your director? Is it your CFO? Should this be the person who understands this should be the person who understands the purpose of CACP and can make decisions in hiring and also of making large purchases. Who tracks your CACP income and expenses? These tasks are part of the financial oversight cycle that must be done on a day-to-day or month-to-month basis. Do you have an accounting team responsible for this? Is this part of your CACP coordinator's duties? Who maintains labor and supply costs? Is this the person assessing your budget and seeing if you need to make some changes to stay the course with your spending? Is it the financial office contact? Is it the director? Who writes and updates your nonprofit food service procedures? Is it your coordinator? Is it your authorized rep? Who completes your monthly claims? Who oversees your monitors? This can include those who are responsible for hiring or overseeing the budget for monitors. Who creates the annual budget? This will likely be the same person who oversees your financial management or someone who works very closely with them. Who maintains receipts and invoices? Is this the same staff who tracks CACP income and expenses? Does it go through multiple departments? And for all these tasks, do you have backup staff who can take over if the regular staff is out for a period of time? We know that some organizations are running a little lean with limited staffing, and in these situations, it's even more important to have a backup and emergency plan in place. So do you have procedures written down somewhere or other trained staff to follow in case you're out for a prolonged period of time? If not, how will your organization make sure they are meeting CACP performance standards? So once you have a sense of the big picture, the next step is to set up a good tracking system. How will you track your nonprofit food service account? So at this point, this is kind of my points that are going to give a little interaction here and there. So take a minute to think about how your own system and how you are currently tracking your CACFP finances. Do you know if you have a way to generate a monthly profit and loss report for CACFP? Are you able to track the amount you receive from CACP reimbursements and then compare them to the amount of CACP expenses? And are you able to track the balance of your account monthly and then cumulatively? And hopefully the answer to all these questions is yes. Many sponsors use accounting software that makes it easy to set up separate fund account for CACP. However, if you're not sure, or if you feel that your system is not quite adequate, the answer is to create a fund account to track CACP revenue and expenses separately from other organizational revenue expenses, or create a sub-accounts supported by the chart of accounts so that CACP revenue and expenses can be easily identified and the balance of the unspent CACP funds can be identified. With a tracking system in place, the next step is to figure out the expenses that you are approved to charge to your nonprofit food service account. Look at your current approved budget and see if the approved expenses match with the expenses you are currently charging to your fund account. Sponsors will have administrative labor costs, and this will require several source documents. Timesheets must be maintained and must identify total time worked, not just time spent on CACP activities if staff works on multiple programs. Time distribution reports are required for staff that complete CACP and non-CACP duties to establish the portion of labor costs that may be charged to CACP, and payroll records must be maintained to support the compensation paid to staff, including deductions and taxes. Sponsors will have costs for supplies and equipment as well, and source documents for this can include receipts for equipment purchased, contracts for items like printer, leases, credit card statements, and canceled checks. Office expenses are often charged to source documents and can include leases, utility bills, contracts, and allocation methods. Mileage reimbursement costs are another mainstay in our charge for monitors. Source documentation needed includes mileage logs, possibly canceled checks or digital transactions showing the mileage of reimbursement that was actually paid. Training expenses may vary depending from sponsor to sponsor, but some source documentation that may be needed include receipts, contracts, statements, or checks. And there also may be some additional administrative service costs, such as contract services, insurance, and membership fees. Documentation may include bills and allocation methods. And finally, everyone will need to make sure they have bank statements showing that all costs were paid in full and board minutes to show the budget was approved. So think about these different expenses, and do you charge expenses in all these categories? And if so, are you keeping the necessary documentation? For the expenses that you're charging, which costs require allocation? Now remember that allocation is required for costs that are shared between different programs like rent or utilities, and the allocation method will vary depending on the expense that must be approved by ODE-CNP on your budget before you can charge the cost to your nonprofit food service account. So if you have a budget available, what are some of the allocation methods you use? So if you are allocating rent or utilities, the ODE-CNP budget has sections that can be filled out along with a place to include your explanation. And this will be important to provide since it allows ODE-CNP an understanding of how you came up with each equitable percentage that is allocated to CACP. And it usually would be by square footage. When it comes to rent and utilities, it's usually based on the time and space used and allocated. So let's finish up with our expenses section with the discussion on unallowable costs. Some common issues include costs that are not approved on the budget or are not properly documented. And so remember to keep all source or supporting documentation is very, very important. Other unallowable costs are listed on the slide and can include like non-program costs, licensing fees, general business expenses, fundraising costs, improvement of facilities, bad debts, fines, late charges, tips, and gratuities. So what are some unallowable costs that you encounter most often? And then what do you do to prevent charging unallowable costs to CACP fund? So just understanding common unallowable costs helps to ensure that your staff can catch these costs and charge them appropriately to avoid a finding during a review. Okay, so besides expenses, to understand your account balance, you need to know what income is coming in. How do you track your CACP income? For most sponsors, this will be a much simpler process since ODE-CNP provides you with the reimbursement information, including a breakdown of your administrative reimbursements under the Payments tab. Sponsors will need to track their administrative reimbursements, provider pass-through funds, and carryover funds separately. All of these different sources of funding should be totaled to identify the annual CACP revenue. So once you know both your CACP income and expenses, you can finally determine if you're meeting nonprofit food service requirements by calculating the account balance. ODE-CNP requires that sponsors are able to determine their CACP nonprofit food service account balance on a monthly and annual basis. Sponsors with an accounting system that is set up to track CACP revenue and expenses separately from other sources of revenue and expenses should be able to generate a profit and loss statement for any time period that is needed. So think about your accounting system. Are you able to determine your nonprofit food service balance on a monthly or annual basis? And hopefully the answer is yes. But if not, make sure that you are setting up your account codes correctly. So in situations where sponsors have a positive account balance, meaning that not all the CACP reimbursements have been spent on CACP expenses, you will want to make sure that all allocable and allowable expenses per the approved budget are charged to your CACP account, especially if you have expenses that you decided not to charge. So this may mean requesting a budget revision and getting it approved by ODE-CNP. And in situations where you still have a positive account balance after all allowable expenses have been charged, you must retain the excess funds for future expenses and evaluate the expenses charged to identify if there are additional costs that could be charged to CACP. So make sure to be proactive about managing your positive account balances. Remember, you can only carry over 10% of the unspent administrative reimbursement funds to the next fiscal year. And as a best practice, make sure that you're monitoring your balance on a monthly basis And if necessary, submit a budget revision timely so that budgets are approved prior to implementation. Funds must be spent on all allowable program expenses with the goal that you are not building an excessive balance. Having excessive balances may mean that you risk having to return unspent funds. By monitoring your fund balance each month and using the budget revisions wisely, it will set you up well. Make sure you check in with OD, C&P in early summer if you anticipate a higher than average carryover balance. So there will be sufficient time to receive OD approval for the budget and to expend the funds prior to the end of the fiscal year. And since I just realized we're in May and not quite early summer, but almost there, this is a perfect reminder if you haven't been looking at your fund balance, if you need to reach out to me sooner than later for a revised budget, please do so. Okay. If you have a negative account balance, and this isn't not nearly as common, but if you have a negative account balance, additional unrestricted funds must be moved over to the nonprofit food service account, or a journal entry must be completed to cover the expenses that exceed the reimbursement. So when completing the CACP budget, all sponsors are required to identify the source and amount of unrestricted funds available to cover the negative CACP balance. So insufficient unrestricted funds that may imply that the sponsor is unable to pay debts and has diminished financial viability, which is one of the performance standards that sponsors must meet. So, right, I'll take another question. What unrestricted funds are available for you have for your organization in the case of a negative balance? I have seen donations. I have seen other grants. I have seen just savings from the organization. I've seen a variety of things. All those are acceptable. We're just looking to make sure that as an organization, besides the revenue that you have from this program, you have those other sources of revenue from other funds earmarked to cover costs that may exceed the reimbursement. Okay. Ultimately, the goal of the nonprofit food service is to show that all the CACP income received is being spent on all allowable CACP expenses, and that any excess reimbursement over expenses is retained and only used for CACP expenses and the improvement of the CACP. So if you typically have excess CACP income each month, you'll want to contact your assigned specialist to receive technical assistance on allowable expenses and improvements to the CACP program. If you typically have a negative account balance each month, you'll want to ensure that you have sufficient unrestricted funding that can cover the cost of operating the program. And then once you have a tracking system in place, you're able to determine a monthly and annual accounting report of your CACP fund account. Completing an annual budget will be easier since you will have historical CACP revenue and expense data, and the budget identifies projected CACP income and CACP expenses for the upcoming year based on historical data and anticipated changes. So with the CACP nonprofit food service account set up, simply pull your profit and loss reports for the year end and update your budget based on this information, along with any knowledge you may have of upcoming changes in costs, such as staff raises, contract changes, or rate increases. So before you start your budget, you'll want to make sure you have all the people and materials needed to complete your budget successfully. So first, you want to make sure that you have at least 2 responsible principals involved. And responsible principals are the authorized representative, a food program coordinator, the financial office contact listed in C&P Web. The first will be the person who will complete the budget, and the second will be the person who will review the budget and act as a double check to verify the information is correct. Both of the responsible principals must be sponsor staff, so an outside bookkeeper or food service management company staff could not work on the budget. It does have to be 2 different people, so make sure that everyone involved is in the loop and available before you start on your budget. And having 2 different people really helps to ensure that all information is accurate and reinforces the program integrity before OD, C&P reviews the budget. Next, make sure that both the responsible principals are reviewing the 3 main resources that we have for the budget. Both of them will need to check that they have reviewed the FNS Instruction 796-2 Revision 4, the USDA Guidance for Management Plans and Budgets, and the Administrative Guidance for Family Daycare Home Sponsors. This one is attached to the Excel budget spreadsheet. These are resources with a vast amount of information, and not all the information will apply to your programs, so you don't need to read through the entire resource, but instead review the table of contents, if there is one, and focus on the sections that will apply to your situation. Okay, finally, you want to make sure that you have all the data that you will need. This includes your projected CACP income for the upcoming fiscal year, and think about whether you will be adding providers or not, what carryover funds you may have, and what unrestricted funds you will have available in case you have a negative balance. And finally, think about all of your administrative expenses. What do they include? Once you have all this ready, you can begin to work on your budget. Please keep in mind if you have any substantial changes to your program mid-year, such as adding or dropping line items in the budget, increasing a line item, approved line item by $1,000 or 10%, whichever is more, you must submit a budget revision to OD prior to incurring those costs. So where does the management plan and the financial management procedure fit in with all of this? So both of these are required to be completed by all CACP sponsors, and they help ODE CNP to better understand how sponsors are managing their CACP nonprofit food service accounts. A management plan is a summary of your organization's written practices and procedures. It's a guide to you, it's your guide to demonstrating your sponsoring organization's ability to manage CACP operations and meet the CACP performance standards. This is required information, and sponsors complete the online management plan in CNP Web under their Applications tab. The financial management procedure is required as part of CACP performance standards on the program accountability. Sponsors are required to have a detailed written procedure covering how they manage their CACP nonprofit food service account. Essentially, you need to write out how you're going to implement all the steps we have gone over with tracking CACP income and expenses. And then we will now have a new template for family daycare home sponsors to use, and we'll go over it in just a few slides. But both the management plan and the financial management procedure works together to provide a full picture of your financial management practices. And finally, consistency is key, especially when information is provided on multiple documents. We want to provide you with as accurate and up-to-date information as possible. And so you'll want to make sure that the information you provide on the annual budget matches with the information you have on your management plan and the financial management procedure. Anytime you update one of the documents, you must update the others if there are information that overlaps with each document. And this is very important because ODCNP compares all these documents with each other when reviewing your application during renewals and when we go on site for administrative review. And in all cases, we want to make sure that the information matches with your current practices. ODCNP does this to make sure that you are following all requirements in the CACP regulations and that we've been going over in this training. And so now I finished this piece, and thank you. I'm going to move this over to Shirley to go over some of the details of the written management plan and financial management procedure template that we released last week.
All right. Thank you, Teresa. Most sponsors are very familiar with the management plan since it is a required application on CMP Web and part of the CACFP renewal process. Sponsors are required to update their management plan in CMP Web each year to complete renewals. In addition to renewals, if there are staffing changes or operational changes during the year, sponsors must also update the management plan since it is a living document that reflects current big picture CACFP practices for your organization. Again, like Teresa said, it is important that your budget, your management plan, and your written financial management procedure all align with each other to ensure that your operations are running smoothly and that everyone at your organization is on the same page regarding CECFP duties. ODECMP has created a new written management plan template. This is the file that was sent to you via email last week and is now also available under the CECFP page under the Family Daycare Home section. And I'm going to drop this into the chat here. This version in the chat, this link is very slightly different from the version you received due to adjustments to formatting and formatting only. The management plan covers pages 2 through 6 of the template. And if you have already looked at this template, you will notice that it has many questions that are not currently included in our CMP Web's management plan. So think of this as a preview of future management plans that will be rolled out to sponsors when we eventually move away from CNP Web one day. This expanded version will help our sponsors plan out all financial related duties for CECFP instead of the limited scope that is currently in our CMP web version. That said, the management plan is still meant as a basic overview. For a comprehensive look at your day-to-day procedures, we will need to look at the CECFP Financial Management Procedure. The written procedure is required as part of Performance Standard Number 3, Program Accountability. For family daycare home sponsors, ODECMP has required multiple procedures in the past few years during renewals. This included the procedure for CECFP expenditure documentation, a policy for ensuring CECFP funds are used in accordance with FNS 796-2 Revision 4, and procedures to prevent and detect improper financial activities by employees, and the procedure for daycare home reconciliation records. ODECMP's new financial management procedure template is part of that template we provided and part of the link that I just shared. And this procedure template will start on page 7 of that PDF. Sponsors are not currently required to use this template, but it does incorporate all of the previous requested procedures into one comprehensive template with a question and answer format. The template helps answer all of the required questions on financial management, including how is fiscal integrity of all CECFP funds being maintained? What is your process to ensure accountability of all expenses? How is your organization ensuring program funds are only used for authorized CECFP purposes? What safeguards do you have in place to prevent improper financial activities? And how do you ensure CECFP administrative costs do not exceed regulatory limits? Your written financial management procedure, no matter what template you use, must provide an accurate view of your current practices. A written procedure must be on file, either electronically or on paper, and be available to ODECMP staff when requested. ODECMP staff will review all financial management procedures during administrative reviews and on other occasions as needed. During the administrative review, ODE staff is checking to ensure that sponsors are following the written procedures that they have. Written procedures should not be written and then stored away to be forgotten until the next time ODE asks for the document. It is a living document and should be updated every time there is a change in your internal process. This may be due to staffing changes, timeline shifts, or other procedural changes. Whenever this happens, make sure to update your written financial management procedure as well. So let's look at the new template. It may be helpful to pull up the PDF or the printed template if you have it available, since we will reference page numbers as we go over this. The template includes that 5-page management plan section. This section pulls all of the management plan questions from the CMP Web Management Plan application related to financial management and then consolidates and expands on it. It may be helpful to start by filling in this management plan to get a sense of the bigger picture of your CECFP operations. This version may be especially helpful if you need to understand all of the basic big picture tasks that are involved for CECFP financial management. You do not have to fill out the management plan, but it may be a helpful tool to get started. So again, this is pages 2 through 6 of your PDF. The actual financial management procedure starts on page 7, and it includes 4 sections. Section 1 is on CECFP administrative expenditures. This is the largest section of the template, and it includes 3 of your previous required procedures. Section 2 is on provider meal reimbursement pass-through funds, and it'll detail out your procedures related to how you handle those funds. Section 3 is a short 1-page section on where you keep your records. And then Section 4 on the last page has a checklist of resources used and reviewed, along with links to all of the resources. We don't have time to go through the entire template, but we will highlight a few areas that will be helpful for you to understand more fully. Looking at section 1, the CECFP administrative expenditure section has 3 parts. Part A is an overview and covers nonprofit food service management, how expense documentation is managed, allowable and unallowable expenses, and allocated costs. Part B is on administrative expenses that are charged, the positions who are responsible for tracking, the documents saved, and the time frame for entering expenses. Part C goes over how you determine your nonprofit food service account, how you verify your income, how you close your claim months, and your year-end reconciliation procedures. Let's take a look at the overview questions on page 7 of the template. These questions look at the bigger picture, and there's some overlap with questions on your management plan. There are some additional details that are requested, however, such as the software program that you use, the fund account numbers or account codes that you use for tracking CECFP expenses. The questions in this section are all fairly straightforward and require only short responses like you see in our examples above. And we're going to move forward to page 9 now with allowable and unallowable expenses. We start getting into questions that ask for a little more detail on how procedures are implemented. So in question A, it asks, how are allowable and unallowable expenses determined? And the sample answer that we have, we wrote, only expenses approved by ODECMP in the CECFP annual budget and with source documentation on file will be considered allowable. All other expenses will be considered unallowable. So as you can see from this, the answers provided do not have to be very long or very complicated. On pages 10 through 12, we have questions related to allocated costs. If you do not have allocated costs, you can check off the not applicable box at the top of this subpart. Most family daycare home sponsors will have some allocated costs, so make sure to fill it out with all of the allocated costs you have. If you have more than 10 allocated costs, go ahead and print out extras of page 11, or let us know if you need us to adjust that PDF for you. For these questions, we would recommend that you review your previously approved budget and start from there. Include information in this section on the allocated cost, the approved percentage, and how the allocation percentages or methods are determined, and the documentation that will be saved. If you have items requiring specific prior written approval, those costs will require detailed explanations on the methods of allocation. The administrative expenses questions start at the bottom of page 12 and it goes through page 13 of the template. There are some expenses that may not be applicable, and you can check off the not applicable box in the leftmost column if you do not charge any expenses to that category. You will notice that it follows the ODECMP budget template tabs with schedules A through F. Again, look to your approved budget and start from there. Enter in the staff responsible for tracking these expenses and the backup positions. Include what documents are saved, and then on the rightmost column, enter in the time frame you use for entering in expenses. Your information may vary from the example provided on this slide, but it showcases how this can be answered. Short and to the point. And all of the answers that you provide, keep in the back of your mind. Can someone who is new to this organization and or to CACFP understand how to conduct financial management for your CACFP operations using this procedure? So going on to determining nonprofit food service now on page 14, we are going to highlight question E. This question asks you to describe the process that is used to document annual CACFP administrative reimbursement income and expenses. In our sample answer, we state that a profit and loss statement will be downloaded for the fiscal year and detail out the account codes and time frame that will be run to generate the report. We also detail out how this will be verified for accuracy. Our answer includes where this information will be saved, but you can choose to skip this information in this answer and then put it in section 3 on page 20 only. Again, we are looking for short answers that directly answer the question. You also want to make sure that you are completing out section 2 on provider meal reimbursement pass-through funds on pages 17 through 19. Pass-through funds must be maintained to regulatory standards as well as admin funds. Under 7 CFR 226.16H, sponsors must distribute provider meal reimbursement funds received from the state agency within 5 working days. The questions in this section walk you through the required steps and ask for the positions responsible for each step as well as a backup position. There are some timeline and short description questions as well. Make sure that you have a written procedure for addressing this, even if you're not using the ODE-CMP template. And in section 3, we have the section on where records are kept on page 20. This is important to know because it allows new and current staff to easily locate files and provide a common understanding of where files should be stored. Sometimes files may be stored electronically. Other times, especially with more sensitive information, it may only be available as a paper copy. Make sure to document where these files are. It is important to have supporting documentation for all allowable CECFP expenses charged to the CECFP fund account. If there are files that are restricted to only certain staff, it is also helpful to note that on your procedure. For example, with the payroll records example on this slide, the J drive might not be available to the program director or CECFP staff, so it lists out who to contact if you need access to those records. And finally, we have our resources used and reviewed section on the last page. This section includes links to resources, including manuals and regulations. Make sure to check off the resources that you have reviewed and add ones that are not listed but may be relevant to you, like internal organization financial manuals. Every time you update your written financial management procedure, it is helpful to check the following. Did you need to update your management plan and budget as well? Sometimes your updates are minor and your management plan and budget won't be affected, but other times you will have major shifts within your organization and it will impact both. Did you double check and verify that the fiscal responsibilities as listed in your written procedure match with the actual responsibilities for your staff? Is the written procedure accurate? And do you fully understand and account for all expenses that are and have been charged to your CECFP nonprofit food service account and is approved on your budget? Are the timelines for tracking and reporting transactions accurate? And are all documents saved in the right files by staff? Is everyone saving them to the same location? All in all, the goal of the written procedure is to ensure that any of your staff can use the procedure to pick up where someone else left off and still make sure that all CECFP financial requirements are being met. The procedure must match with your actual practices on site, otherwise it doesn't have much value as a procedure. And the procedures must allow any internal or external reviewers to determine whether you are meeting CECFP financial management procedures or not, requirements or not. So in review, in this training, we have gone over the learning objectives, and hopefully you now have a comprehensive understanding of how financial management is implemented and tracked in CACFP. And you are now able to review and update your CECFP financial management procedure to ensure that it meets all CECFP requirements for nonprofit food service accounts. We went over Financial Management 101 in the CECFP. We discussed performance standards that must be met by all sponsors, what nonprofit food service actually is, and we went into detail about why it is necessary to meet nonprofit food service and how that can be implemented in your own organization. feel free to reach out to your assigned child nutrition specialist. They will be very happy to assist you. If it is questions that they can't answer, we can always take it back to our management team and discuss these questions and then get back to you an answer. I'm going to close up this training with a short message from the Oregon Department of Education. ODE supports equity and excellence for every learner and seeks to work with school districts, education service districts, and community partners like you. We believe all children should have access to a high quality, well rounded learning experience. This institution is an equal opportunity provider. So thank you everyone for taking this ODE CMP financial management training for family daycare home sponsors.